It's been 8 years since Kill la Kill came out, and 7 years since it ended. With a series this top tier ending on a high note, there would be no sequel to this great work of art. Well, I want the series to continue. Hello everyone, Obscure Titan here with an analysis of Kill la Kill's aftermath and a script for what could be a sequel to the anime. I think it's obvious to some of my subscribers and followers. I am a fan of Kill la Kill. This is what brought my interest in the medium back after falling out with Sword Art Online, but we all know how bad that one was years ago. It's no secret I mentioned Kill la Kill only once in my Shantae lore video, where its fan service ended up being used for utilizing characterization, lore building, and plot progression. I don't know what it could have been if it wasn't. Today, I want to focus on a particular topic, hence the title, and give out an idea on what Kill la Kill's follow-up could be. I am, of course, talking about my upcoming project I haven't got to touch on yet. That isn't to say that I'll discuss all the project's ideas yet, since I don't want to give away too much, but just offering the general idea itself, that would suffice. There's going to be major spoilers up ahead, so take caution to anyone who has not seen this show. You can skip to the timestamp on the screen. We should discuss episode 24 and the OVA in order to transfer Ryoko's characterization and develop it into the fanfiction I had in mind. Ragyo Kirigiya utilizes the powers of complete control, absolute submission as she puts it, in order to use everyone's life fibers, reviving the primordial life fiber it needed everyone else with it, all except for Senketsu, who is the only one to rebel. After managing to stop the monster, Ragyo takes the rocket with her, but Ryuko follows by absorbing the other life fibers from her allies. An intense battle ensues in space. Ryuko and Ragyo fought with their blades. It eventually ends with Ryuko finally dismantling much of her powers. As the battle ends, Ragyo takes her life by squeezing her own heart and vanishes, but not before mentioning that life fibers will return in some form. Senketsu uses the last bit of his power to return Ryuko safely, and dies as every last bit of life fibers diminish. Ryuko returns home safely as Satsuki and her Elite Four create a safe landing by piling themselves together. The series ends. But there was one thing left. 2 weeks have passed, and a ceremony was held at Hinoji Academy before Satsuki officially shuts down the system for good. However, it was interrupted by the evil clones of the Elite Four. Ryuko and the real elites battle against them and finds out that Rei is behind the clone's creation. Taking her scissors blades in hand, Ryuko uses them in their larger form, and Satsuki convinces Rei to end the conflict peacefully. As the academy sinks, the blades go along with them. Everyone takes one last look at it as they headed to Japan. There was a drawing of Ryuko Matoi in 2019, which was made by me. It depicts her having a black t-shirt, skirt, boots, long sleeve gloves, and 2 shorter red blades. There isn't much to say for her story-wise in 2019 up until September 2020. It was when I started delving into her role in the currently unmade sequel. The idea is Ryuko faces an invasion from another plane of existence. Her friends, including Mako, get captured, and she has to go find them to bring them back. She faces off a legion of warriors named the Elite Squad, who are followers of an evil queen named Miss Alika. However, Miss Alime's first season wasn't out at the time yet, despite its completion. The idea gets polished further with the possibility of Ryuko having an orphan son under her care. This one's inspired by God of War as a reference to establish the relationship between the parent and the child. This child character I mentioned would end up being Kazuto Kirigiya from Sword Art Online. The way this works is the invasion I mentioned would take place a year after Hinoji Academy sank. In that perspective, Ryuko would have been 18 at the time the series ended, which means she would turn 19 in the invasion. This will be apparent near the end of this segment. The invasion occurred, and a lot of Ryuko's allies are taken. The latest one was Satsuki Kirigiya. Growing desperate, she tries to save her from the invaders, but is told to save Mako instead, as she's the closest friend to her all who are currently alive at that point. For the sake of plausibility, we'll take Yokohama as an example. She races across the city to find Mako before any of the Misalikan soldiers got them all. As Ryuko got closer to where Mako is, she's stopped by General Zolkar. He leads the invasion and takes Mako with him. Desperate to fight, Ryuko tries to find a weapon but gets trampled by Sleika, another follower of the invasion. The army disappears, with Ryuko getting back up with her life fibers regenerating. But as she did, a house nearby was on fire. A young boy was banging on the window as flames engulf it. She goes in there to save him from the disaster, risking her life to doing so. But just as soon as she grabbed him out, the building collapsed. Exhausted, Ryuko looks up at the sky where all the Misalikan army vanishes into a portal. Enraged by this realization, she lets the boy down and kneels in defeat. A few hours after the attack, Ryuko takes the young boy with her home inside a household, one where each has a slide-open doorway. As Ryuko slowly cools down, she asks the kid his name. Due to his age, he uttered the word Kazu. Ryuko decided to lengthen his name to Kazuto, either believing it's his real name, or she needed to improve on it. Now for the boy's age in this scene. Kazuto would be 4. The intended time skip is 6 years, as Ryuko uses it to build herself up more, hence her slight brutish physique, which would lead to 10 for Kazuto, while Ryuko would be 25. For the sake of suspensive disbelief, we'll say Kill la Kill's year would be 2015, the invasion is 2016, and the 6-year time skip leads to 2022. The same year Mortal Brothers 2022 missily may and often bearing do, though it takes place in a different dimension despite the same year number. Bringing back an all-powerful villain would seem like an arbitrary move on anyone's end, especially for big-name IP franchises. Mortal Kombat 11 and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker being the most blatant examples. Though I do believe that doing so isn't automatically a bad thing. The reason it's been looked down upon is the handling of the impact their deaths give. There is one clear distinction between Ragyo and those like Shao Kahn and Palpatine.
The life fibers will keep advancing throughout the cosmos, and soon more will come to this planet. Count on it.
Ragyo mentioned that life fibers will return, meaning she herself could return. One possibility I noticed on my DeviantArt feed was that she returns as a chip. I myself made a concept of the idea. The idea was that Ragyo would be reduced into a computer chip that random villains would find and use, though the idea would be fleshed out more as she persuades Diatra and Zolkar into restoring her fully. Perhaps Ragyo could return as a severed head, with a chunk of her face and hair being torn off, exposing her muscle tissue and remaining life fiber strings flailing around. I had an initial idea that because of the capture of Ryoko's friends, Satsuki would be the base model for Ragyo's return, and the inclusion of Misalika's ashes, implying that Misalika could also return according to Zolkar, though Zoldak would suggest that Misalika's soul needs to be found in order to resurrect her. Regardless, they go with Ragyo's wishes and the necessary material to do so. That material is known as the Dark Fiber, an upgraded form of life fibers. On one hand, it's much sturdier than its original form. On the other hand, it's less stable, and can cause serious effects such as mental deterioration, as one example. Ragyo could slowly make everything in Nexus Netherworld under her control by manipulating Diatra and the regime, even at the cost of allowing the deaths of their followers. She could even use Nexus Netherworld's crystals in order to reproduce her remaining life fibers to morph Diatra's militia into her dark fiber army. This is a controversial element, but one that plays as a vital attribute. In this take of Kill la Kill's unofficial sequel, Kazuto, or as we know as Kirito, is the orphaned young boy whom Ryuko saved during the invasion in 2016. As 6 years went by, Kazuto has grown into a youthful preteen who is seeking adventure. Now you might be asking, Titan, how can you use a Gary Stu and make into a character people can take seriously as well as see as relatable and interesting? And to that, I would patch his SAO characterization out of existence. But if we have to be practical by maintaining those key elements, yet improve on them, there are some traits that we need to keep in mind for his characterization. 1. Have him come off as a badass wannabe. Basically, if Ryuko Matoi is the role model warrior Japan looks up to when intergalactic threats come about, Kazuto would idolize her and grow up to be like her. The problem? He's not fully as mature, because of him still being a child. On top of his behavior as such, Kazuto can be rebellious, resentful, and cocky. Those traits can balance out his more admirable traits, if you can call them that in SAO, so that they don't feel foamed in and allows his flaws for Ryuko to overcome. It's not just a Kazuto problem, but it's one that Ryuko has to deal with as his adoptive mother. Much of his rebellious attitude could be inspired from how Ryuko acted during the events of the anime. This way, we don't have to see the exact same outcome where it's just one character dealing with their problems, but also solving another's as well. 2. His interaction with characters. Though his harem trait will definitely be absent, it's not to say that he won't be forming any friendships, whether if it's male or female. It's to allow Kazuto to learn more about the characters whom Ryuko has known for years, and those who are new. I don't expect any of the Disgaea characters to be canon since, well, they're owned by Nippon Ichi Software. But for the sake of plausibility, that could be a good implication of new characters. Or just new characters of Kill la Kill altogether, besides from those of the Tales of Miss Alika novels. At least there won't be any slugs groping anyone this time. 3. Humility is a major attribute I like for Kazuto to push towards as the sequel progresses. Ryuko had an entire series of her growth as a character, so that could be used for him for the same reason. That being said, it can be adjusted. Either if it's Ryoko's criticisms where Kazuto takes issue with, being a perfectionist can be a good character flaw for a protagonist to go through, and maybe even if it's his lack of patience. Regardless of what character flaw Kazuto has, this can help him feel a little bit more relatable rather than just being this flawless Mary Sue from SAO. Ryuko would go from an angsty student to a stoic master. Throughout the anime, Ryuko Matoi has shown traits such as being a rebellious, arrogant, and tense individual. Asides Mako and her family, we also got her home teacher, Aikuru Mikisugi. He's one of Ryoko's allies who helped her throughout the events of the show, and the finale. Though not a lot of sex-related references will be utilized as much here, the sequel will be more emotion-oriented. And as such, this is more of a mother-son journey where Ryuko not only lets go of her frustrations in the past, but also taking the mantle of responsibility, both as an adoptive mother of Kazuto and a representation of Nudist Beach's triumph over Ragyo's communist totalitarian tyranny. The one aspect I want to explore is Ryoko's post-Senket's death arc. We all know how she's coping with the loss of her most trusted friend who's been with her all the way up until returning to Earth's atmosphere. Perhaps this is one where she's still healing from that loss. But perhaps it's her failure to saving her friends from Diatra's army is where the realization exacerbated greatly. On top of having Kazuto under her care, Ryuko becomes more emotionally drained. Her improved physique and prowess can come at the cost of her emotions, so that Ryuko doesn't come off as weak in Kazuto's eyes, though her stoic interactions can win her son's ire. This isn't to say Ryuko should go through what Steven Universe did, where he turned into a whiny brat who bloats into a pink jackass and causing unnecessary problems to his friend. That would be a preposterous way to continue the character. Then again, seeing how Steven Universe progressed into a socialist liberal propaganda, I don't see it having any hope of improving. Steven Universe joking aside, Ryoko's character could still face new challenges. As previously mentioned with Kazuto, this come off in a similar fashion as to how Kratos went through with his son Atreus. Ryuko learns to be more patient, maintaining her sense of badassery, and being an overall good role model to him. This also means Ryuko learns to show more love to her son. Hiding her emotions can serve as a strength but also a weakness at the same time. If that's the case, because being overly emotional was her character flaw, then not having one can be so too. Throughout this sequel, Ryuko feels ashamed that she shows any sign of emotional moments, and that could cause Kazuto to think she's weak and a fake hero. But with the help of the new characters, she begins to open up about her softer side, becoming more down to earth with Kazuto and opening up about her past trauma. Maybe Kazuto won't think of her as a pathetic fake hero she feared of, but maybe as another human being who's striving to live. The realization that Ryuko is a life fiber could also contribute to Ryuko hiding the truth from her son. Ryuko in this sequel can have new conflicts, not just new villains to face, but also those with herself and Kazuto, and still maintain much of the development she got in Kill la Kill. Aside from possible characters I have in mind, Godzilla and Ghidorah are two possible key factors where the battle between Ryuko and Ragyo can be set in place. In Godzilla vs. Miss Alika, the King of the Monsters arrives to Nexus Netherworld through time travel with his powers, following the events of Versus the Synecdoverse, and sets the world ablaze. After an intense fight with the Destroyer, he was put into a coma by Miss Alika's tranquilizing liquid through a needle, tough enough to go through his exterior. He slept for 7,022 years until Ryuko and Kazuto found and reawakened him. No specifics on how this will be laid out, But if Godzilla opposed Misaliga's regime, then he could be an ally to Ryuko and Kazuto after helping him defeat Jin Ghidorah for the first time, whereas Ghidorah is an artificial pet under Diatro and Ragyo's command. This depiction of Ghidorah is much more serpentine and has heads with hoods that fold out. They could be used to hypnotize his prey, along with his wings, which resemble his GMK-ish design that fold down but extend outward. Both of them can be experimented into life fiber concentrated monsters, with Ghidorah being more built up of dark fibers. While the former can be more powerful, he'll be less stable. Godzilla, being the more stable opponent, with his natural life fibers being placed on him during his last few years of slumber, can be used against him, which proves him to be a viable ally to Ryuko and Kazuto. This isn't to say Godzilla and Ghidorah should appear, since this is by fanfiction, but if there were two mythological beasts that can be viable options, they can be good to include for the final battle, but it's totally optional. To sum up this entire essay, it's God of War with Kill la Kill in mind. A little bit of SAO and Godzilla. This isn't to say this is the official sequel to Kill la Kill by any stretch, obviously due to copyright issues being the easiest to spot. Another being that the series' ending is considered by many to be one of the best endings in anime of all time. As far as we know, Studio Trigger has not announced a sequel to the series and probably won't. If there was going to be one, then they not only announce it, but also ensuring that all the development of the original meant something, such as Ryuko's progression from her past life into a new one, seeing the other characters' lives, and possibly Ragyo's return as more life fibers are spreading. But the takeaway from this is that there's plenty of possibilities for a series to continue. There's good fanfiction, and there's bad ones too. But wherever your creativity takes you, you might see some surprising results. At the end of the day, Kill la Kill is still one of the greatest shows in the 2010s that animation has experienced. Kill la Kill Remnants of Ragyo's script is nearly being finished as we know it, and as soon as Elora the Search for Spyro is done, I can get ready to start making it. This is Obscure Titan, and thank you for watching. Feel free to subscribe, and I'll catch you all next time. Over and out.